Well, good afternoon and welcome to another episode of The League of Biblical Enthusiasts. With our last episode, we ended our series that we called Manuscript Hunters and Collectors. And so today we begin a brand new series entitled Cities of the New Testament. And this promises to be an engaging and educational series as it brings together the text of the New Testament, ancient history, Greco-Roman history, ancient Jewish history of the Second Temple period in particular, and the field of archaeology and how it bears upon the incidents described in the New Testament. These three fields are especially interesting to me and fascinating, and I hope they are to you as well. As you know, you can study the early Jesus movement in a number of different ways. One way would be to study the important personalities involved in the beginning and the early spread of the movement. Figures such as John the Baptist, Jesus, Paul, Peter, James, Barnabas, and many others could be studied. Another way would be to study the ideologies on which the movement was based and the rhetorical techniques used in gaining converts. To what authority did they appeal for their new teachings? How did they engage their opponents? What arguments did they use to bolster their new faith? Another way, and we will take this one in this series, is to study the cities and countries where the movement first took hold and the relationships between these cities. Just a few days ago, I read, or rather skim read, through the New Testament, Matthew through Revelation. And I listed every mention of a country, a district, a region, a city, a town, and village. And my list came to something like 150 or so place names. Before we continue, at this point, I do feel compelled to state my bias right up front. And I'm debating whether to say this or not. But I think many of you know where I'm coming from. But if not, here we go. I understand the narrative portions of the New Testament as authored by people who believed they were writing history. Whether or not you accept their history, their stories, as being factually true, that's up to you. But I'm convinced that they intended to provide a historical account of what they described. I do not favor the theory that these narrative accounts are fictional, pious, or otherwise. I do not subscribe to the view that the gospel writers were elite authors who imitated stories from famous Greco-Roman writers like Homer and Virgil to illustrate their new hero Jesus and his new movement as superior to pagan counterparts. I refer particularly to this view with a rather clumsy title, The Claremont Graduate School of Greco-Roman Priority in the New Testament. Now, I know no one else calls it by that name, but that's what I've come up with for myself, and I don't buy that particular view. My view is that the New Testament is a thoroughly Jewish text throughout, written primarily by Jewish authors, imbued with Jewish scripture, history, culture, and Jewish points of view. No doubt it was written within a Hellenistic context, absolutely clear, but constrained by Jewish religious sensitivities. Enough of this. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. So let's move on. I say all these things to say we are studying these cities because they are the sites of important events described in the New Testament that take us through the early Jesus movement. By looking a little closer, we will gain an appreciation of how each city plays a part in the overall story of the emerging Jesus movement and its spread throughout the Mediterranean region. Now, from these 150 or so place names that I found, we will select a few for particular attention and devote an episode, maybe more, depending on the city, to them. I am now in the process of considering which cities that we will cover. I haven't decided exactly which ones, but because the list is lengthy, but some of these that I will mention soon are definitely going to be featured in the series. Now, if you have any ideas, I'm completely open. Please let me know in the comments what you would like to see. I always enjoy hearing from you, learning from you, so keep those comments coming. Now, without further ado, here's the list in no particular order that we will consider: Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Nazareth, maybe Cana of Galilee, Bethsaida, Jericho, Capernaum, the Galilee region, Caesarea Maritima, Tiberias, Samaria, Damascus, Antioch of Syria, Cyprus, Crete, Tarsus, Athens, Philippi, Rome, Ephesus, Corinth, Colossae, Thessalonica, and possibly others. The list is long and we could go on for quite a while. But here's how we'll approach each episode. First, we will introduce the city, the New Testament references to it, note the stories that take place there, who was involved, what happened, what was the issue, how did it play in the overall story. Then we'll see what archaeology can tell us about that place. And we will note the significance of the city for early Christianity and beyond. In all of our discussions, we will note both scholarly and popular resources for further reading. In general, let's observe that in the first 70 years of the Jesus movement, it spread from its beginning in Jerusalem to the borders of the Roman Empire. And that is no small accomplishment. As an example, note the countries represented by visitors who came to Jerusalem on the Feast of Pentecost somewhere around AD 30 at the birth of the movement. And this is recounted in the book of Acts, chapter 2, verses 9 through 11. And here are the various peoples listed: Parthians, Medes, and Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the parts of Libya near Cyrene, visitors from Rome, both Jews and converts to Judaism, Cretans and Arabs. Now, we know that the Apostle Paul and his companions traveled throughout what is now Turkey and Greece and established multiple congregations. Paul spent a couple of years in Rome at the end of his life, and at one point, he had plans to visit Spain. One important convert returned to his home country of Ethiopia and no doubt spread the faith there. Here is a map showing the geographic scope of the Jesus movement in its first 70 years. For example, it's roughly 1,400 miles from Jerusalem to Rome. So, we have lots of ground to cover, pardon the pun. Some resources that I'll be using in this series include Cities That Built the Bible from Robert Cargill, published in 2016. Articles from the Biblical Archaeology Review. Field reports, interviews, lectures from scholars such as, for example, historical geographer Stephen Notley, who has for some time been studying what he believes to be the true city of Bethsaida. We will also consult other archaeologists like Jody Magnus and others. All of the relevant resources will be found in the description box, as is our practice for every episode. So we hope you follow the series all the way through, and if you enjoy what you're learning, please like, subscribe, and share this channel with like-minded friends. So stay tuned. In the next 10 days or so, we will bring you the first episode of Cities of the New Testament, featuring, quite obviously, the most important, perhaps, of all, Jerusalem. Brought to you by the League of Biblical Enthusiasts.